I'm Piyanka Jain, CEO of Airing, a San Francisco-based data science and data literacy company, and the author of Behind Every Good Decision. Today in the show, we're going to talk about data literacy, how not having it is going to cost you your business, how data is the new currency of the world business, and how you need to know and have single source of truth. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives. Let me ask you, what do you need to do to up-level your leadership? Are you sometimes overwhelmed by or struggle to understand this new gold rush called data? How can you and I develop greater data literacy in such a way that we are more effective both in business and in leadership? Well, stay tuned because that's where we're going on today's show. I am your host, Dov Baron, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything by transforming meaning into action. You can find out more about me by going to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. This episode of Leadership and Loyalty is brought to you in part by our other podcast, which is Curiosity Bites. Curiosity Bites is the answer to the question, how can we bring people together who completely disagree? This is exactly what your heart, your soul, and your mind have been craving. It's your chance to sit in on some real and sometimes intense conversations with some of the world's most interesting people. We're talking about astronauts, neuroscientists, philosophers, holy people, quantum physicists, skeptics, entrepreneurs, multi-Grammy award-winning entertainers, and even some folks you might think are completely nuts and you completely disagree with them, who you will find fascinating. Simply go to dovbaron.com to find out how you can sign up for and sink your teeth into the delicious Curiosity Bites. As always, you can now find us, and what I mean by that is both of our shows on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever you tune into podcasts. We also need your help in staying relevant. So please go over to wherever it is you tune into your podcast and do us a favor, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. Share it with everybody else you know. If you're a regular listener, big thank you to you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners. We are honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. And you can also listen to us on Google Home and Alexa. Simply say, play Dov Baron podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down and dive right in. Back in, I think it was 2017, the esteemed Economist posted a report that blew the top off why certain companies have more worth than many countries. The article in The Economist was titled, "The World's Most Valuable Resource is No Longer Oil, but Data." More and more businesses are waking up to the importance of data as a strategic resource. Research released by the Economist Intelligence Unit reported that 60% of the professionals they quizzed feel that data is generating revenue within their organization, and 83% say it is making existing services and products more profitable. After surveying those executives around the world, it became clear that businesses are finding more and more ways to turn data into value. But at the same time, the report found many are hitting stumbling blocks, which are frustrating those efforts. In just 34% of these global executives responded saying that they feel their organization is very effective. Just 34%. Being transparent to customers about how data is used, that's not so good. And 9% say they feel that they are totally ineffective in these areas, which can be vitally detrimental to building customer trust. But does data literacy matter? And if it does, How can you and I develop it? Well, stay tuned because that's exactly where we're going on today's show. You see, my guest is Piyanka Jain. She is a well-known thought leader in data science and data literacy. She is an internationally acclaimed best-selling author and ex-head of analytics at PayPal. She is also the founder and CEO of a San Francisco based boutique data science consulting company called Iring. Got it right, I think. And the creator of a data science framework called Badia, which you probably don't know, but I do because I'm married to a brown girl, means idiot. Some people list, clients list includes companies like Comcast, Google, Regeneron, GE, and that's just to name a few. Ladies and gentlemen, please put your hands together and help me welcome Piyanka Jain. Welcome.
Thank you for having me.
I think most of us are pretty much idiots when it comes to this because data is a new science. I mean, it's been, science has always used data, but data science in business, I think, at a general level of, the whether we're in the black or the red, those kinds of things, sure. And KPIs, sure. But it's a much bigger thing now. And I think that most of us are fairly in the dark and maybe even feel a bit like idiots around it.
Yeah, Dov, and then, like you said, KPIs, sure, but I can't tell you how many companies we talk to, they understand maybe the top KPIs,
Yes.
but not very clear understanding of what drives those KPIs and what can you do to move those drivers to actually move the KPIs. So they do lots of things instead of doing few things, which will get them their next round of growth or profits or whatever. So it's not very well understood. And some of the numbers you quoted, 34%. I mean, from my experience of doing this in and out, that's very few people. Less than 4% of the companies we work with or we have experienced are highly effective in putting data to work.
Yeah.
Very, very few. And those are data elites, and you know them by name.
Wow, that's fascinating. So here's where I always like to start the show. I want to know, in this world of influencers, who is somebody that we might not know, somebody we might not be familiar with, although we could, who's had a major influence on you and guided you in your leadership, whether it was directly or indirectly? Who's somebody who's had that kind of influence on you?
So there are. I've been in growth stage. I've been learning for a long time, and so let me talk about two influences: the earliest and the latest.
Thank you.
And the earliest influence, as you might already maybe think about, is my dad. He was an amazing scientist or a problem solver, engineer. He was one of the pioneers of turning waste into energy. And based out in India, he had patents and so on. But one of the things he gave me, and as this is his present to me, is fearlessness. Fearless to be himself, and that gave me so much freedom to do and think whatever, to follow my path instead of being worried about what is it that people are thinking, how to be governed by others. So that was an amazing legacy I got from him, and many other things. I mean, amazing, astute problem solver, mathematician. I got a lot of those things from him. But most importantly, from a leadership perspective, is that aspect of being authentic and being fearless, which is so freeing in this world, which is governed by social media and what people are saying and doing and thinking about you. Yeah. It's such a relief.
How did he demonstrate fearlessness? What was you took it on and went, wow, that's fearless. How did you demonstrate that?
He was fearless every day of my life that I got to experience him. He was fearless. So, he was one of the first people to go to Russia when India was setting up their steel plant, and he went to Russia not knowing the language. He was from a small town in Rajasthan. He didn't even know English very well, And he showed up in this country and totally enjoyed and learned. And he was one of the best technologists for Bokaro Steel Plant as they set up the new steel plant. That was years ago. At that point, I was not born. And then later on, as I saw him, he was 40 or something, and he left the establishment which made him Bokaro Steel Plant to pursue his own dreams. Left the plushness. He was a very senior leader in this establishment. It was a very cozy and cushy life for all of us in a small town, very, very well organized. He left that and went to the unknown of Delhi, which is the capital of India. Crazy place as an entrepreneur, starting from scratch at the age of 40 something, fearless, like no problem, I'll start anew. And he went from this senior leadership role to working in this, because he believed in this whole waste to energy. He went from there to like, okay, I'm going to learn the ropes. And he was setting up factories. He would be there in remote factories and manufacturing units, day in and day out, going from this cushy leadership role to on the ground field, because he was learning the ropes and he was all about machines and how the things work. And to me, every part of his life was fearless. And the way he went, he transitioned 2016. It was so such a funny story. Not funny. Now you can call it funny, but he told everybody April 1st, I am retiring, and I'm going to be just now doing advising. I'm going to be no more working. And we are four of us as siblings. We were like, oh my God, finally, Dad is going to stop working. Yay, that's great. And then he says, I'm just going to do little consulting, little advising. And he goes and signs some contracts for advising and all that. And April 1st, he's gone. So he didn't know we didn't know what transition he was talking about, but he just left.
Wow.
What a beautiful, I would say this is the kind of that I would like, right? This is the kind of transition I would like. If I want to go, I just want to go. He packed everything. He packed his office. Everything was clean. Unbelievable way of going, right? This is fearlessness to me.
Wow. So your dad was very on point.
Very on point.
Including, I'm leaving the planet. I'm just going to call it retiring, but
yeah.
Date when I'm out.
Yeah, I don't know whether he knew that he was going to leave the planet, but it seems like he was saying to everybody he's retiring on that date, and he seemed to leave the planet. So it seems like okay.
That's a pretty precise retirement.
Yes, exactly. Very clean too. Very clean. He didn't leave anything. Nobody was cleaning up his offices. Nobody was doing anything. He just cleaned up.
Yeah, my wife has often said, Dov, if you die, I really fear for our children because I've got so much writing and it's scattered and it's everywhere and it's not organized and so many contracts and stuff that I've got running. And she's like, oh, it'll be a disaster. These poor children. I said, it's okay. I'm not dying for a while yet.
Yeah.
Better not. Whereas your dad is like Mr. Organized, got it done. That's fantastic. You said there was a second person. Who was that?
So more latest. So as I've been growing, more latest is you might know of him. His name is Dr. Joe Dispenza, and he's a neuroscientist, and he's an author of the book Becoming Supernatural. Mm-hmm. And I've been following his work for a year and a half, and I recently got to experience him in a advanced workshop a month ago. And really amazing why behind the what of a lot of things. I grew up spiritual in India doing meditation, but his why behind the what, the scientific explanation behind all these things that we experience on a day-to-day basis, fantastic. Mm-hmm. And totally love his authenticity, love his this adherence and loyalty to truth. Mm-hmm. To be able to speak, his authentic self. It's fabulous, so inspiring. So that's my latest influence, and then lots of influences in between. I'm always learning and growing.
How has that impacted you personally?
Oh, I'm growing so much. His book Becoming Supernatural. I've been hearing it on. It's an Audible. I've been hearing it on repeat. and I'm getting so many good nuggets out of it. But this whole belief, and I was also very deeply influenced by Abraham Hicks. This whole aspect of really we are the creator of our entire experience, not just little bit here and little bit there, like entire experience, moment to moment. What we experience, we create. We
Mhm.
have the ability to create. Now we can create deliberately, or we can create in auto mode. It's up to us. That is so empowering and so freeing.
Mhm.
And I've been on that journey of experiencing that myself, but more and more as this is getting reflected back from the universe, it's just amazing for me in my growth.
Yeah.
I'm growing as a person, more authenticity, more freedom, more skills,
Mhm.
more happiness, more joy, more bliss, everything more.
Good. That's wonderful. I spent time with Joe about 10 years ago because I write about those things too. So,
How wonderful. How
so
wonderful.
yeah, and his work is really great. As is a lot of people in that world. There's a, again, it's my term for it is it's the science of the woo woo, right? So there's a lot of the things that people think of as woo woo that are actually have neuroscience to them, and
Yeah.
and there's a lot of quote data to it.
Yes.
But it's easy. One of the pieces I spoke about for years is if you take the circle of science and you say, okay, this circle represents everything that is known, and we say
Mm-hmm.
that that circle is 12 inches in diameter. Okay, then I ask you a question: how big was that circle 100 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
And you go, I don't know. Let's say 6 inches. And I go, great. So now let me ask you, what was everything that existed in the other 6 inches that we now call the science? And they go, unknown. I
Woo-woo.
said, yeah, it was unknown, but what was the language we used for it? And they go, I don't know. I said, the language was mystical.
Yeah.
It was mystical. It's now science, but it was mystical.
Yeah.
So now let me ask you, what exists in the other 12 inches beyond the one we know?
Yeah.
You call it mystical, unknown. I call it science. You just not
Yeah.
got there yet. So
Yeah.
if we don't have the instrument to measure something, we say it
Yeah.
doesn't exist. And
Yeah.
that's very interesting in the context of the work you're doing with
Data driven.
data, because the whole thing around data is revealing, in many ways, revealing what was unknown. I
Yes.
mean, in many ways, it's a detective mechanism for showing us what we didn't know before, for
Yeah.
revealing what we weren't aware of.
Yeah.
So I want you to sort of start there for us and help us to understand, why does data matter,
Yeah.
um, and how can we better, at a very simple level, understand it, because it can get very complex.
Yeah, yeah. So let's think of it simply. Let's say I was 100, 200 years ago. I was running a business, and I was running a business on the streets of, let's say, London, and I was, let's say, selling, apparel, men apparel, right?
Yes.
How many customers do you think I would experience and let's say I was the sole owner of that shop, and then let's say there were a few people helping me. How many people would I experience on a daily or a monthly basis? Mr. Mr. Tim, Mr. Joe, all these people, I would know them by name. I
Yes.
know these same people will be coming to me
Yes.
every 4 months or every 6 months, every time they need to go to a wedding or their new whatever. The same people, they're like, let's say 100 people, let's say 200 people, I would probably know them all.
Yes.
But now, 100 years later, 200 years later, I am this online retailer. Let's say I am um, Zulale, or men's apparel, something,
Mhm.
right?
Yes.
.com. I have how many customers now? Do I know
Mhm.
them by name? Do I know Mr. Joe, Mr. Smith? I have maybe hundreds of thousands of customers, maybe million customers. I don't know them by name. Before, 200 years ago, I knew Mr. Joe likes
Yes.
his suit cut this way. I knew Mr. Smith liked these kind of shades and colors, this kind of material. Do I know that 200 years later for my 2 million customers? I don't.
Probably not.
How am I going to learn about that?
Mm.
Through data. So data is the currency. That which I knew 200 years ago by just shaking hands with my customer, now, because most of the world and the business is highly digital, I was selling in the streets of London to my 200 customers who were just in London or around. Now I'm selling globally to every corner of the world and to millions of customers. I don't know them. I'm not seen, any of my customers. How would I learn about them? Through data. And if I
Hmm.
track, like you talked about instrumentation, if I can instrument the data to be able to capture, first, let's say, hey, when the order comes in, I'm going to capture them. So I started understanding at least the customers who are coming in. Then I said, well, who are these people who are coming to my website and not converting? Then I start learning about my prospects and what are they doing on my website. They're clicking here, they're clicking there. I start learning about their website behavior and so on. So more you can instrument, like you
Hmm.
said, more you can measure, you can manage. And
Right.
so data becomes this way of, instead of running, I mean, there's another way of running this business. I could just say, I know what my customers need. I know what Mr. Joe or whoever, a million people need. I can just run by my gut, or I
Hmm.
can run with data and knowing individually personalize this person, Mr. Joe, tends to click in these places, tends to like these kind of suits and this kind of material. And thereby my personalized recommendation for him is going to be this. This is personalization and so on, right? So this is where we are. This is a new reality. Digital has happened
Hmm.
to us. Digital transformation is already a couple of decades old now.
Yes.
Um, there is so much data. But there's another part of it, right? So 20 years ago or 30 years ago, there was this person called data science, the analyst who used to sit in the basement somewhere with their
Yes.
servers. They were collecting data and then they were analyzing it. And I would call them and say, hey, what's my what's my revenue looking like? How many customers placed order today? Or, how many prospects actually came to our, checkout system? He could give me those answers,
Yes.
right? How much was data was like your analogy of 6 square inch, 6 inch diameter.
Hmm.
Now if 20 or 30 years ago it was 6 inch diameter, it's
Miles.
bazillion times that. Right?
Miles. Yeah.
Yeah, it's miles. It's so much, so much more data now exists, and it's just not Mr. So and so down in the basement who has access to data. It's me, you, everybody, a business owner, a marketeer, a product manager, a executive, a operations person. Everybody has access to data. They are getting information about whatever they have launched, whatever they are doing. How is that performing? Everything is instrumented more and more. uh, we need to know what to do with that. So we
Mm.
need our own literacy. We need to know how to process that. And so data becomes, if data is the new currency, then we need the new language, a new way of dealing with this data, a new skill called data literacy, to be able to understand the data we have at hand.
Right.
um,
So, um, as you said, data is the new currency, and as I said earlier, data has now been shown to be more valuable than oil and many other resources that we held as very highly valuable. The fascinating thing is that we've moved from a tangible, valuable thing to an intangible, right? So,
mhm,
I did a presentation several years ago where I talked about um, invisible assets, right?
mhm,
So, you look at back in the 19, even as late as the 1990s, when you looked at the assets of an organization, they were physical assets. And now you look at the assets of an organization, and very little of it is physical. That's the least valuable thing.
yeah,
And it is in this data. But I think that many of us in the leadership positions still don't, particularly those of us who are maybe certainly over 45, don't really grasp that. It
yeah,
still seems to be, well, and again, even this has been punched in the nose in 2020, which is, well, we own this real estate here and this real estate there. And now it's like, well, yeah, now your real estate's been sitting empty for a long time.
yeah,
It's not going up in value. So even
yeah,
that physical debt is not. So
yeah,
we've gone to this non-physical, intangible value
yeah,
asset.
yeah,
And a lot of the time, those are the assets that are changing hands rather than a physical asset.
yeah.
So, how do we help the leader who is watching, listening to us, and say, in understanding how to grasp the value of their assets. Because I know I had this conversation with somebody last week, and it was, we were talking about podcasts actually,
Yeah.
and I was saying,
Yeah.
how do you measure the asset value of a podcast
Yeah.
when, it's like, okay, well, there's no physicality to it. I mean, sure, I have a
Yeah.
microphone and I have some other stuff, but not
Yeah.
much
Yeah.
comparatively to trying to own another business.
Yeah.
And I do believe that this is a media company and it will be sold as such.
Yeah.
Not this particular podcast, but any podcast.
Yeah.
How do we grasp the value of data inside of an organization that we don't think of as a data value business?
Yes.
If you're a data collection audience company, we go, oh, of
Company.
course,
Yeah.
yeah, but
Yeah.
we're not.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's a great question, Dov. That brings us to data monetization.
Yes.
So before I talk about data monetization, let me make one thing clear. Many people, if they look at data, let's say we have sheets of data, you probably have seen your Excels of data of podcasts and the audience and the performance and
Yep.
how many listeners and how many interactions, subscribes, likes, and so on. If you just look at the sheet of data, whether it is in Excel or in Python or wherever else, um, it doesn't mean anything.
No.
Data doesn't speak. It
No.
only responds.
Mm-hmm.
So the question is, when we talk about how do we monetize data, especially for the leaders who are 40, 45 plus, who didn't grow up with graphs and charts like my 6-year-old is, they're showing her pie chart already. I was like, whoa, this is advanced. But most of us didn't.
No.
And so how do you go from for your leaders who are saying, well, I'm running this bank, a credit union. I've been in banking business. I know ACH before ACH was even there. I know how the pipes are laid. I know this business. I know my customer. I don't need data.
Mm-hmm.
From there to saying data is the new currency, like, oh, this is a huge gap. And there comes in between somewhere data monetization. So one thing is for leaders, I would ask that it's the same, going back to your square inches, 6 square inches of diameter. Whatever we know right now, whatever you know, leader, is this in this diameter. Whatever you don't know is what you're going to learn from curiosity, by instrumenting, by sharpening those measurement tools to be able to measure that. And if you are curious, you are going to instrument, you're going to invest in those, and you're going to learn beyond your imagination. Today's customer is very different from yesterday. 2021 customer is different from 2020 customer.
Yes.
2020 customer was different from 2019 customer. Things
Yeah.
are rapidly growing.
Yeah.
And the only way for you to know that you don't know everything is by sharpening your tools and learning from those measurements. And if you're open for it, you will be endowed. You will get benefits beyond your imagination. So now the question is, yeah, that's great. How do I begin? How does data monetize it? What is the value of the data that I have? The value of the data you have is the amount of usage you're putting it to work. Now, as if you don't use it, it has no value. There is no value. So the better question is, how much value can you drive from your data? And that brings us to, there's a framework in my book, Behind Every Good Decision, called 3 Key Questions Framework. It's in a section called Leadership Kit. So in this book, there's a whole section for leadership. And there's one framework called 3 Key Questions. And this is a way, these 3 key questions are a way in which you begin to ask questions of your data and your business to understand what works in your business, so that those insights can drive value. Now, how do you do that? Very simply, these are 3 questions are, how am I doing? So what are my KPIs? How am I doing? Second question is, what drives how am I doing? So what are my driver KPIs? And the third are, who are my customers and what are their needs? As you begin to answer these questions, and we have frameworks to solve and answer these questions, as you begin to answer these questions, there'll be more questions which come in, and those insights will power. For example, let's say you learned that 80% of my customer acquisition is through organic. Let's say for you, Dov, 80% of your podcast acquisition, people who find you, are organic. Okay, that's interesting. 20% is something that you can buy. Let's talk about 20% and 80%. Now, you know that the biggest person is organic. What do you need to do drive more organic? You need to
Yes.
pay attention to your SEO and search words. Where is it that you want to surface? Where are those organic coming from? What are the search terms and so on?
Mm-hmm.
When you start asking this question, like, who are my customers? Where is the acquisition coming from? Uh, what do they need? Which sites they are coming from? More and more, you're going to get more and more basically insights.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what is going to drive. So you're going to use those insights to drive value. That is the value of data. More value you can drive, more
Right.
is the value of your data.
So let's pretend everybody else is as naive as I am for a
You're
moment.
not.
So we get what you're saying. That makes sense. Okay. But now we go to, but where do I start? Because I was having a conversation again recently with another person about um, moving their company forward technologically. And this is a very major player in the world. So we're not talking about
Yeah.
a small company
Yeah.
who are really saying, we don't know where to start.
Right.
It just, I mean, even the things you just said seem overwhelming.
Yeah.
Like, where do we start? Do we say, oh, well, let's advertise for somebody who's a data analyst who can tell us what data we should be looking for? But
Yeah.
that's not what they do. They
Yeah.
need to give you the data, but you need to know what to ask for. So where do we actually start?
Yeah. That's a great question. Again, lots of answers in that
Mm,
leadership toolkit, in that book. Let me first before I answer that question, let me first define data culture. What is it for an organization to have a culture of data culture?
right.
I define it by 4 Ds, 4 attributes. The first one is data maturity. What is what kind of data you are collecting, how good is it, how accessible it is, how usable it is. That's all data maturity. The
Mm-hmm.
second aspect is data driven leadership. How data driven is the leadership? Do they believe in it? Even if they don't necessarily are in the process of it, do they have vision for it? Do they hold their team accountable for the results that the team is saying they're going to drive, and so on, right? How do they
Mm-hmm.
make decisions? The
Yep.
third aspect is data literacy, and this is throughout the organization. Does your marketer, does your product manager, does your engineer, do they have the right level of, and again, data literacy is not one size fit all, but do they each have their right level of literacy that they need to function very well? And the fourth one is decision making process. Do you have a process by which you make decision? Is data part of it? Do
Mm-hmm.
you know, like, hey, we're going to grow from 12% this quarter or this year, and we're going to go to 12% because we're going to do these 4 things. And we know that because of the blah 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 blah. And
Right.
by the way, we're going to look back and say, did we do it? Did we grow? Did this drive as much as we were thinking of it will grow, right? So these are the 4 aspects of data culture. And again, every organization in this world will be on a spectrum from data naive to data elite, in that whole
Yes.
spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Some people will have greater data maturity. Some people will have leaders who are just coming in from a more data driven company. Some people might have greater data literacy, whatever. And there's a whole spectrum of it.
Yes.
But data maturity, the first D I talked about, is the foundation on which this whole thing stands, right? If but the lead but the biggest champion of this is leaders. So it's the leader who says, I want this organization to be data driven. That's the
Mm-hmm.
first step. That desire, let's be data driven. Let's get curious about our customers. What are they doing? What do they want? Let's stop assuming that we know everything. Can
Yes.
I, me as a leader, can I start saying to myself, no, okay, I don't know everything. Yes, I've been here in this business for 40 years, 30 years, 20 years, but I don't know everything. Let me
Mm-hmm.
learn from my customers. Let me see from my customer behavior. Let me learn from my employees, their employee behavior.
Yes.
Everywhere there's data. Once that curiosity, once the leader decides, I want to be data driven, then the first step from there is building your data maturity, data foundation. And yes, you would need the right kind of people. And once you have that vision, once you set up that aspect, you will find the right companies who can come in and help that set up that data maturity for you. We do that kind of work. Many companies do that kind of work. Um, let's start instrumenting. Let's take one area at a time. Marketing.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, Is your CRM system there? Is it connected to your data warehouse? Is it all talking to the same place? Do you have a single source of truth? Do you understand when a customer calls? Do you capture that information when your customer calls your customer support station? Do you capture that information, and that is that connected to your marketing engine? All of that. So just begin in one particular area and start bringing that data in. So data maturity is the foundation. And again, it's not a 0 or 1. It's not like I'll be 100% data mature before I do anything. As the data maturity starts coming in, the leadership needs to start coming in, their data drivenness. Data literacy needs to start coming in. You need to start hiring then people who are specialized in data scientists, data analysts, but also training and retraining people who you currently have, these
Yes.
highly tenured people that you have 25 years of experience being in your business. My gosh, they are valuable. If only you can add that data skill, data literacy to them, you'll make them so powerful, right? And they will start actually making superb decisions for you, without you micromanaging them. They'll be doing these little tweaks. Just for a client recently, we launched two experiments for them. This is an internet app company, and it's a freemium business. Most of the customers coming in are using the app for free. A percentage of those people are actually they trial and they become paid customers. We doubled their trial rate just with two experiments. Doubled, right? Like, what does that mean? It doubles their revenue.
Yeah, of course.
Right? If
Yeah.
if it was 1% and we made it 2%, 1% revenue was, let's say, $1 million. 2% is $2 million. You double the
Yeah.
revenue for an internet
Yeah.
app company. How can you do that? Just there's a systematic way of approaching it. But that is how. And some of the leaders who are looking at that number, they're like, oh, we don't believe in that, because initially, when you don't know how powerful data is, when you start seeing some of these results, propensity, we made a marketable, another freemium company, lots of free downloads for one of their products. We used a propensity model, machine learning model, to find lookalikes. You have paid customers, they look like this, and you have 50 times that in your database of prospects who are downloading something else free. Can I find a lookalike of these people and then find these? Because machine learning, you can do those advanced stuff. You found exactly similar looking customers in that free database, market it to them, and increase their marketable universe by 4 times. And the upgrade rate from that base of new prospects was 2 times that of the original customer base. And if you've not experienced it, you're like, whoa, this is too good to be true. Yes, this data is powerful. And that, again, back to your question of what is the value? The value is how much we are driving. For that internet app company where we doubled the revenue, the value of the data is that 1 million incremental we drove from those 2 projects. And it's going to continue growing, right? Because now we are on that path. We're going to keep cranking the shifts and basically oiling the machine.
You brought up something that I heard you mention before in a previous conversation that you and I had, which was a single source of truth. That's a very tricky term in today's world. Tell us what you mean by that and how that would apply.
Yeah. So what happens in companies as they begin their journey of data maturity is, finance is catching some customer information. It's coming from an ERP system in billing. They have some revenue numbers. They know these many customers are buying. Now that same customer is also being captured. Let's say it's an internet app company, is being captured through the internet app. That's triggering an event that is being captured by another system through the app, which is feeding into your data lake and big data system. And it's basically saying, here are your customer XYZ. So there are very many sources of that same information through various flavors, right? There's marketing feeding in data that this customer called or this customer did this. There's an app usage, let's say, for this company. There are various sources of that information. And most often when it initially starts, it's getting like, no, for this problem, we'll get this software. For this problem, we'll get that software. And they're basically, your data is fragmented in these many systems. And if you ask a finance person, hey, what's my revenue? What's my customer? You'll get a different answer than, hey, what's my revenue from a marketing person? You start
Yes.
getting different answers. And then you like, oh my gosh, when you start getting different answers, you lose trust
Yeah,
on
of course.
data, right? And you're like, oh, okay, but maybe we don't know what we are doing because I'm not getting the same answer. So it's very, as the data maturity evolves, it's paramount for the organization. This is, by the way, a very natural phenomena. You will have
Yes.
disparate systems, it'll be in silos. And at some point you will say, this is not working because for the same question, we have multiple answers from different departments. We need to create a single source of truth which will have one answer for what's the revenue, what's my customer count today, how many customers visited my website today, how many sensors were fired in the, my oil and gas, field today. All of that needs to be single source of truth. So how do you do that? You bring various sources of this information together and you reconcile it, which is not an easy task to do for anybody who works in this area, but it's very important to do, because when you start having to make decision at the executive level or at the micro level, you want to make good decisions based on good data. If you have multiple sources, you can't trust anything. And so that whole process of bringing it together from your internal perspective, disparate sources, and creating. Now, the question is, gosh, there are like 1,000 metrics that I can instrument it in one place in your marketing, in your billing, and it's like, how many data can I collect? How many data can come in the thing? And you don't have to boil the ocean. That's one thing we want to tell people. You can collect everything, but you can't use everything. You don't need to use everything. And so that's where the 3 key questions framework that I talked about, going from the top and asking the questions and asking further questions to figure out what are those top metrics, top 300 to 500, we call it. Your single source of truth, your central enterprise data warehouse, or whatever form it sits in, should have 300 to 500 metrics in there. You can be collecting, 10,000 data points. That's fine. But as it boils down to either aggregated, rolled up, merged, reconciled, whatever it is, 300 to 500 metrics which are meaningful for you should be one. There should be one source, so that when an executive, a CEO pulls that number, or a analyst pulls that number, a marketing person pulls that number, they're all talking the same language. Now we have one vision of the truth. Now we can move something forward. Now when we say, hey, our churn is, our customer churn currently is 54%. That's really high. We need to reduce it to, try to reduce it by 10% and 20% and so on. We're talking the same language. If we can't agree, you and I can't agree on our churn number, how will we make progress?
Right.
So that's the whole concept of single source of truth. And it's a big problem in data maturity space. It's everybody struggles with it.
So, one would have to assume that, if you are a Fortune 500 company, you've already got some of this in place. Yes, it probably needs a good deal of refining because it is a immature part of business in the context of 200 years.
Yes.
However, if you're a medium-sized business, you probably are doing some of the things in a sporadic way, not really understanding it.
Yeah.
And then it comes to, oh my God, do we need an extra $1,000,000 to just build a data house and understand this?
Yeah.
So is this something that one needs a huge financial resources to build?
Yeah.
And if it um, is that going to kill mid-size and smaller businesses who just can't compete in that world of data?
Yeah, 20 years ago or 30 years ago, Dov, if you wanted to stand up a server, you had to go to your officedepot.com and buy your server and then connect it into your systems and then, get an IP. And
Yep.
we don't have to do that anymore.
No.
You have services in cloud, SaaS, you pay as you go. You have the 3 big providers are AWS, Azure, and GCP, Google Cloud. They're all in cloud. You can stand up systems within an hour, and connect the pipes and pay as you go and pay monthly, pay by usage. So things are very affordable and it's getting cheaper and cheaper by the day.
Mm-hmm.
That does though mean, but again, tools are the way to. It's a it's a method to the means, right? My means to the method, right? Or whatever it's called. It's not the end goal. So
No.
you need to still think about, be thoughtful about what do you want to do. So again,
Mm-hmm.
start from the top question. What are how am I doing? What drives, or how am I doing? Who are my customers? Let's start asking those questions. And in order for me to answer those questions, what do I need instrumented? And for me to instrument those, where does what need to sit? So if
Mm-hmm.
you start from a plan, a high level plan, whether it's a data plan or a solution plan, architecture, some plan, that's when you can start using these tools effectively. Now if you decided, hey, I'm collecting million data points, I'm going to bring everything to my Google cloud, you're going to start spending money very, very quickly. Before you know,
Yeah.
every day you'll be cha-chung. Basically, it'll be. So you have to be thoughtful if you don't want to spend too much money. But if you're thoughtful, you don't have to spend too much money. You can. There are systems out there very quickly, very accelerated. You can stand those systems up.
So so let's go to the other side of this, because we've talked about data in the context of business and growing business. And I know there's a section in your book around data in the context of leadership. And leadership is not just making decisions, it's people. It's
Mm-hmm.
dealing with the people.
Yeah.
And so in the context of people, since things like Cambridge Analytica, the world is growing increasingly leery about how major companies are tracking people, their data, and whether their practices are particularly ethical, and they seem to lack scrutiny. Talk to us about that side of it, which is the ethics of data collection in the context of customers trusting me with that, my team trusting, my people trusting me with that, because it seems in many ways that a lot of our privacy we're giving away to Facebook, who are selling it to the next
Mm-hmm.
organization. And I'm using Facebook as an example, it could be
Yeah.
anybody,
Yeah.
certainly Amazon, AWS, or whatever it is, right? So
Yeah.
talk to us about the ethics of data collection in the context of leadership.
Yeah, and it really does come from the leadership. So privacy and ethics is the DNA, is something you need to start thinking about early on as you start collecting data. What are your ethics? What are your policies? What are your beliefs about how private or non-private data should be? Now, some companies say, yeah, I mean, if you're going to use my tool, your usage is mine because I'm going to learn from it, whatever else, and then I can sell it. And there's that extreme, right? We know companies, I mean, there was a whole hullabaloo around WhatsApp, and the Facebook acquired WhatsApp, and now the policies are changing.
Mm-hmm.
WhatsApp used to be completely, there was no data sold, and now it's going to be shared, and so
Yep.
on. So that's one end. The other end is companies like Apple. They are very, very specific about privacies and how that is used even within the organization. Product managers don't have access to data across for the even the products, and what they can use, what they can't. And there's regulations coming in with GDPR and others. There are regulations coming in as to what you can buy, what you can collect, what you can sell, what you can store. But a lot of it is still in the hands of leadership, not in the hand of individual companies. Whether what should they be thinking and doing, and so be thoughtful about it, I guess, is a question. There's no, I don't think there's a right answer,
Mm-hmm.
because if you think, for example, let's look at this freemium app company. I'm providing this for free. Now I have to monetize this somehow,
Yes.
somewhere. If I
Yep.
don't put advertising, I
Mm-hmm.
can't monetize it. And
Right.
if I have to advertise, I have to collect personal information so I can personalize. So there's that is the answer. Whereas the other one is like, oh, you buy it, you get an app, there's nothing free, you're going to pay for it, and there'll be no ads, and so there's there's a whole end to it. And I think it's just need to be thoughtful. Leaders need to be thoughtful of what is their policy versus some of the things you have seeing in the world going around, where they backpedal, they decide one policy, they backpedal, and they're like, no, we don't. And and the Cambridge is a completely different story. It was breach.
Of course.
um, So that data breaches and cyber attack, those are it's very real. Nowadays, you're not getting attacked by airplanes and bombers. You're actually getting you can and that's happening day in and day out. That's a new reality. And the more machines are getting smarter, the people with AI, with ML, more sophisticated systems are being used often to crack those systems. So it's real.
Yeah.
That's another side that needs to be addressed, and there are lots of good people and companies which are working on that, and it's being paid attention to. A lot of good leadership by finance companies are there, that they are setting up new standards of what and these, by the way, a lot of people think that if my data sits in cloud, GCP, AWS, Azure, it's going to be less safe than on-prem. That's not true. Those systems are a lot more sophisticated than a lot of our on-prem systems, where you might not have the kind of even though you're in a physical location, your server systems is sitting behind some firewall, it still may not have the sophisticated system as some of these are. So it's all in the implementation. So the short answer to your question is be thoughtful about it. There isn't a right answer. There are obviously policies and regulations that you have to follow by, but be thoughtful as to why are you doing what, and what and be transparent with your customer. If you are going to be collecting that data and it's going to be sold, or if it's going to be used internally, being transparent I think is a table stakes now.
Yeah, I mean, there's no doubt that the use of data is going to increase vastly and become more and more sophisticated. But there's also no doubt that in the context of that, you are going to get a division, and the division is going to be people who will quote normalize it and go, yeah, it's whatever, because I mean, we even remember when Edward Snowden revealed that the CIA was spying on everybody, people in the United States, right? And a lot of people went, well, I got nothing to hide. Well, if they suddenly make it illegal to sneeze, maybe you do. And you go, well, they wouldn't do that. Well, of course they wouldn't, but they can decide certain things that you don't have any part in.
Yeah.
So, there's this one side is going to be complacency. The other side is going to be hyper vigilance and conspiracy.
Yeah.
And I think it's up to us as leaders to really be not only very cognitive about what it is we're doing, but to really dig into the ethics of how we're doing it and why we're doing it, and then to have absolute transparency. But the problem with that is, at a psychological level, the number one skill of human beings is justification. We can justify just about anything.
Yep, that's
Right?
true. Our rational brain is wired for that. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, we saw them storm the Capitol at the beginning of 2021. And I guarantee you, if you pulled any one of those people aside, they did not see themselves as criminals. They did not see themselves as creating a coup. They saw themselves as patriots.
Yeah.
So the justification process is, and I use that as an analogy because it's something that's very real for people.
Yeah.
And I go, well, there's no difference between that and any ethics and anything else.
Yeah.
Ethics is or morality, for that matter, is even a socially decided thing, and then a subjectively decided thing. So I think that is a real level of discernment and self-examination that is required. And this is why I do believe that, yes, we are definitely going to, there's no doubt we're going into a bigger data world. There's no doubt that data is going to only increase in value. And there's also no doubt that if we're going to do this right, we have to be far more conscious as human beings. We have to be far more aware of how we are using these things and aware of our own desire to self-justify things that are a little on the edge. And then we go into the gray, and then the gray becomes the black. So, I really am grateful for you for clarifying this for us.
Yeah, and there are two sides though, right? There's one is the leadership side and the company side. The other one is the individual side. What do they want to share?
Yes.
And because there's a trade-off. For example, for me, if if I share my location with Google, and I have been a big Android user for a long time, I just moved over to the iOS side, the dark side. So I've been sharing. I'm big into. I love convenience, right? I'm a convenience person, and so when I land somewhere in a new city, and Google tells me, and Google already knows that I'm vegetarian, and tells me it's you've landed at 6 p.m. It already gives me a recommendation for the restaurant on the way from mine to, and it already knows my hotel. It's convenience for me. I'm like delighted by it.
Yeah.
But boy, do you realize how much Google knows about me for to be able to do that, all of that? And so it's our individual. The first time it happened, on one end I was like delighted, like, whoa, thank you. I knew I had to grab dinner, but I just like had no clue where it'll be, and thank you. And then the other part was like, oh my god, how much do you know about me? How much am I sharing? Was I deliberately sharing? Was I even thoughtful that I'm sharing all of this information? No, not on my part, I didn't. But it's a trade-off, and that's where for me to decide, like, what do I want? What do I value? Privacy or convenience? Because I'm basically paying for that convenience through my privacy. You can pay money for it, you can
Right.
pay through your data. And this is the kind of trade-off that is going to happen more and more in future, where basically everything will have a price. Your privacy, the data will have a price, and you
And
can buy it back.
that's the ethical conversation
Yeah.
is, the price you pay is your privacy.
Yes.
And that is least concerning, because I know I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and then that was in the morning, and in the late afternoon, like 4 p.m., 4:30, I went onto Facebook, and there was an ad for the thing I was speaking about with that person,
Oh, whoa, yes.
and I was speaking about it with that person on Zoom.
Yes.
So I'm like, okay, so it's Facebook listening to my computer? Is it listening to Zoom?
Yeah.
And I'm like, this is concerning. This is
Yeah.
definitely
It
because
is
I don't want that
concerning.
conversation to go anywhere.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's really very, very interesting that there is a deeper ethical question. There's no doubt that this is an important part of business, as you said,
Yeah.
and there's no doubt that we all need to have a greater level of literacy
Yeah.
around it and in our businesses, but we also need a greater level of emotional, psychological literacy around who we are and and if we're willing to pay that price.
Yeah.
And as a good friend of mine said, people hate Amazon, and he goes, and yet everybody buys from Amazon.
Yeah.
He said, I don't hate Amazon. I love Amazon
I love
because
Amazon too.
because they save me time, and
Yeah.
that's the cost I pay. They save me
Yeah.
time. I
Yeah.
don't have to stand in a line at a store. I get what I want.
Yeah.
So it's that there's always, always, always going to be a trade-off.
Yeah.
And I really love your point about paying attention to considering what that cost is and whether you're okay with it. And if you're not, that's fine. And if you are, that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah. On the company side, they just need to be very clear in their policies, what they're collecting, that all that should, there's no sneaky business, please don't, because you lose trust, and people, customers are finding out, and overnight WhatsApp lost millions of, I mean, more than millions of customers.
Yes.
So let's not be sneaky about it. From the customer, from the business perspective, be clear as a leader, be clear what you want to be,
Yes.
and make sure that it's clear. And from a individual perspective, know what you want to trade off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So as we come to the end of the show, I always like to ask two questions. One is, how can people find out more about you and all the resources that you offer, including your books? And we'll get to that in a moment. But I always like to finish with, what is one practical piece of guidance, advice that you could offer to our listeners, to our viewers, in the context of what we've been talking about? What's something that they could go do, preferably in the next 24 hours, that would help them to get clarity around this?
I would say for each one of us, data literacy is a key skill now. So invest in that, keep your eyes and ears open. It's not going away anywhere. Whether you're 50 years old or you're 20 years old or you're 70 years old, data is in your face. So if you can find time to read and get skilled up, it's like communication skill. Just like you need communication skill, you need data literacy. And so my shameless promotion will be pick up a copy of my book and read it. You'll get to, it's basically it starts from a hello analytics level all the way to more advanced stuff. But it's a quick way for non-data person. I mean, a lot of data scientists use it too, but non-data person to quickly come up to speed on all things analytics. The book is called Behind Every Good Decision. But regardless of that, there's a lot of good content out there. Get skilled up in data. Data literacy is a skill. Invest in yourself. That's a skill that you need. It's like you need to, if you're living near the ocean, you need to know how to swim. You are living in the world of business. You need to know what to do with data, how to talk that language. So
because
that's
you are swimming in it.
Yes, you are literally swimming in the ocean, Pacific Ocean or the data ocean of data, basically big data.
Yeah.
So that would be one thing I would say is, find time, invest in yourself, just like you're investing in other places. Learn data literacy, learn data and the right level for yourself, and the right information, right resources will come to you. But basically look that direction. It's an important skill to have.
Well, thank you very much. I would love for you to share with our audience where they can find out more about you, your book, and your resources, so they can tap into you.
Sure. So the company name is Aryng, ARYNG.
Lots right behind you, if you're watching on video,
yes,
you can see it right behind the head.
Right behind me, aryng.com. You can find a lot of good information. I am on LinkedIn and Twitter. My handle is Analytics Queen, if anybody wants to follow. Also on LinkedIn, Piyanka Jain. There's no R in my name, Piyanka Jain. And then book Behind Every Good Decision is in Amazon and local bookstores. There's a lot of good information there, so you should be able to find it.
And the company website?
The company website is aryng.com, ARYNG. The name of the company is Aryng, and aryng.com.
Well, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure and honor having you here. Thank you for all that you've shared with us. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. This has been valuable, and I hope that you as a listener will pay attention to what you've learned here, because as you've just heard, you are swimming in an ocean of data.
Thank you.
You can hang out with other conscious leaders, and you can chat about this episode that you've been listening to or any past episodes inside of our LinkedIn and our Facebook groups. Just look for the Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. It doesn't matter how successful you are. If your employees and your customers don't understand what gives your company meaning, you're only working at a fraction of your capability. To find out how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or a leadership strategist and advisor for yourself or your organization, go to dovbaron.com. That's DOVBARON.com. Because unified meaning, or as we like to call it, finding your dragonfire, is the one single monolithic difference between mediocrity and greatness in all individuals and companies. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everyone you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about your data literacy. If you can't read, you're going to have a problem learning. If you can't read data, you're going to have a problem learning what is the most valuable assets of your organization. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your dragonfire to reach that next level of clarity, focus, purpose, and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. And I am out.